Good afternoon, and welcome to the third session of our second day of our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit, Race to 22. These 3 days wouldn't be possible without the work of our amazing sponsors. So thank you to the teams at Atrium, Spiff, Vidyard, SalesLoft, Chorus, Verisant Concert, DemoStack, Ring DNA, and Sendoso. We appreciate you and all that you do. For some background, today's event is hosted by the team at Modern Sales Pros. For those of you not familiar, Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest revenue leadership community for those in sales management, sales and revenue operations, sales development, and the related supporting disciplines. Our mission at MSP is to create an environment for our 20K and growing members to answer questions they'd struggle to solve on their own and to help them see around corners. We do that through great live sessions like what you've been experiencing with the summit this week, through our robust online forum, and in the near future, we are hoping with in-person events. Those of you who weren't previously admitted, you should now have access to the community. If you don't hesitate to drop our team a note via modernsaleshq.com. So we have had a full second day so far. We started our morning with our fantastic panel, Eat or Be Eaten, followed it up with an amazing keynote, and we're ending on a high with Tanner Lacey from Spiff and this great masterclass on why your commission structure is costing you revenue and how to fix it in 2022. So now let's go over some housekeeping notes. First, the important question, yes, this event is being recorded and it will be shared. You'll be able to access this recording as well as the key takeaways and any resources provided on the previous events page of the MSP website. Second, if you have a question for our panelists, please use the Q&A function and we'll be sure to get to them during this event. Now, enough from me. I am thrilled to introduce first our moderator, Will Foley, the VP of RevOps at Brazen. Not only does he dominate when it comes to trivia, which some of you may not know, but he has also shown himself to be a fantastic moderator for MSP, which we really appreciate it. So Will, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Really excited to be part of this event here with the help of Tanner, who's really going to steal the show today. So a little bit about me, been doing RevOps for the last 4 years, built a RevOps team at Splash and now doing that here at Brazen. So couldn't be more excited for the topic at hand, compensation, and it's a big one. It's why we work. So I'm really excited to introduce Tanner, who's going to introduce the topic and a little bit about Spiff.
Awesome. Perfect. Will, I feel like I'm failing as the slide guy here. So if I am, let me know. So just a little, I'll start with Spiff. Right? Spiff is a new age commission software. So what we're focused on doing is a couple of things, adding kind of like unrivaled visibility for everyone involved in the process. So for your sales teams, managers, leaders, company executives, finance, whoever, so they can have insights into your variable compensation plans, see what we can work on, make it easy to manage, as well as just automating a process that's generally meant to be motivating, but this isn't always as motivating as it could be, right? Just because of the manual work involved. Really excited about what we're doing here. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I know that Elizabeth just dropped our LinkedIn profiles there, so would love to connect with everyone on this. So as far as I was supposed to be doing this. I'm already failing at the slides here, Will. So just call me out on it.
You're doing great, Tanner.
So as far as a little bit about myself, one of the co-founders here at Spiff and really focus on our go-to-market section of our company, or side of our company. Having been here early, I've done a little bit of everything. And so I feel very blessed and lucky that I've had a chance to kind of dip my feet in a whole bunch of different parts of the organization and meet some amazing people like Will along the way. So it's like a little bit more on just me personally. I currently live in Salt Lake City. There's some snow on the mountains, so I'm getting excited. I bought my pass this week to, I decided to do Sundance this year for anyone who's a skier, but but yeah, got a couple kids and live in Salt Lake City and love it here. So really excited to dive in and excited to go over some fun topics with everybody today.
Awesome, Tanner. Thank you for the introduction, setting up the conversation. And I think such a relevant topic, especially when you think about planning for 2022. Compensation really drives behavior. And I think today it's more important than ever. So why don't we dive in and get started? So please do, for anyone on the call, this is for you all. So please do drop in questions in the question panel and we will surface throughout. So let's dive in, Tanner.
All right, let's do it. And like, just to back up what Will said there, we're trying to make this as interactive as possible. So we're actually going to go through some, I think, pretty like interesting scenarios that we want to have you plug yourself into. So we'll send you the slides. We'll send everything here that you can do it after too, but we'd love to follow along. We'd love to get your feedback as we go through it. Because the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to walk you through a formula, essentially, like, that shows you how much revenue you might be losing because of your comp plan. And it's really interesting. A couple of things to call out. We're going to play with the law of averages here, right? I know everyone's situation is a little bit different. We're super aware of that. And like, obviously you're going to know your company better than we do. But as we go through this, you'll see some numbers here. Everything's backed up by data. And it's just an interesting exercise. So, but before we go in, like, we're going to go through this process. I'm going to walk you through an example company profile. We're going to go through this. We'd love to get a feel for like what we have on the call today. So the company that we're going to be using as the example, we're saying has 40 sales reps and an average salary or OTE of 115,000. So we have a poll that we're going to be sending out here right now. It should be popping up that we want to see kind of where you land. So 40 sales reps, 100 sales reps, 10. Let's give it just a couple minutes here, just so we can kind of see who we have to make sure that we can relate this to you as we go through the kind of what we have here for you.
All right,
Are you able to pull the polls in? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I'm really excited to dive in and see who's in the audience today. And so it looks like overwhelming majority, 63% of our attendees are with sales teams that are 1 to 20 employees. About 11% is 21 through 50, some larger sales organizations on the call as well. And looking at the average salary OTE on the call, almost spread evenly through each of the last three cohorts, between 50 to 100K, 100 to 150, and 150K and above. So pretty good spread, but mainly smaller sales teams on the call today, Tanner.
Perfect. This will work right then. So let's dive in, everyone. Let's actually kind of walk through this. It's a 3 or 4 step little process that we're going to go through here. Again, please feel free to drop questions if you have them. So the way that we're going to do this is we're actually going to look first at how attrition affects you, right? And we're going to relate that to comp plans. So according to the data, the average sales team loses 35% of its people a year. So again, that's pretty consistent even just with general attrition numbers. But what that means is in our example company of 40 reps, you'll see about 14 people leave a year on average. So you got 14 people who are leaving your company, right? Nothing crazy, nothing revolutionary there. I think that's something that you guys all kind of know is a pretty common fact. And if it's higher than that, it's generally a concern, right? Lower, that's awesome. We want to minimize attrition. Now, what's really interesting is according to Forrester, right, you're going to see that anywhere between 35 to 89, yes, I know that's a big range. There's a few other sources out there too, but about 35 to 89% leave because of comp-related issues, whether that's feeling like they're not getting paid enough, that they don't know why they're getting paid, concerns around their payment, like generally just some sort of distrust or dysfunction around compensation. 35 to 89% people are leaving because of that. So out of the 14 reps that you lost, 9 of them will leave because of bad compensation, or about 9 of them will leave because of bad compensation. Again, also feel free to plug in your own numbers here with this to kind of get an idea of and follow along if you're willing. So the next step here, let's identify the hard costs. Like, just what does that cost for you to fill those seats back up, right? So it costs anywhere between 50 to 80% of a rep salary to replace that ramped rep. And I know this number is going to seem actually low to those of you who've gone through an exercise like this before, and I promise we'll make up for that here in just a second. But anywhere between 50 to 80% of the rep salary, right? So in our example company, it means there would be a $673,000 hard cost for replacing those fully ramped reps, right? So again, we're making some assumptions. We're making some assumptions that people are hitting quota. We're making some assumptions around that, but and also around their OTE. So again, you take the kind of like the 65% replacement cost that we use for this, 150K salary, times that by 9, and that's where you get that 672,750. Now, this is where it gets a little crazy for me, and I'd actually would love your thoughts on this. So I love riffing with you on this as we've been setting this up. It's like, generally speaking, and it's usually a ramping rep at their best is going to perform about 60% towards quota, right? So if you hire someone January 1st and they have their ramp, everyone's ramp's a little different, but generally speaking, like 60 to 70% is a pretty healthy performance from a ramping rep. So in here, I gave our example company an average quota of $1 million, right? Again, a pretty fair, I mean, depending on what you're selling, obviously. But in this scenario, that means that for each rep that you lost because of compensation, you lost $400,000 in potential revenue that you lose just because they're ramping, which adds out to be $3.6 million in potential revenue lost because you're ramping those new reps that you lost to compensated related issues. So Will, would love to get your thoughts there.
You know, what comes to mind immediately, Tanner, is just how easy it is to not include this in your annual planning process. These are things that happen. And the best of us really should be thinking about how we can plan for the unknowns. But in this case, this is not an unknown. People are leaving and they are leaving because of compensation. And we should really, one, fix the problem, but also plan for that in your model, because it has such an impact on you hitting your number, which is ultimately, for a lot of us, part of our objectives in sales or rev ops. So this makes a lot of sense to me, Tanner.
Yeah, I'm totally on the same page. Well, it was when I was doing this and setting this up and thinking through it, I tried to think back to if I had ever thought about it like this before. And I really hadn't. Like, I think we all would agree that it's kind of common to understand that, like, people leave, and some people leave because they don't feel like they're getting paid fairly, whether that means like they're not getting paid enough or they're not getting paid consistently with their comp plan. Like, especially in sales, it's such, like, in all the right ways, a very coin operated, money driven like career, right? People leave because of that. And I think sometimes that we look at that, we kind of figure out like how we can do it. I think a lot of the times we focus on culture first is a way we think to fix that. But like at the end of the day, us thinking that we can hit if you have attrition related problems to comp, us thinking that you can hit your company goals by just replacing those seats is a little bit untrue unless you replace more, right? Like, essentially what this is showing us is like, if you lose 9, you need to replace them with 12 to actually hit your number, which is, again, if you have churn related issues, it's going to be a negative cycle you get yourself into. So what was, just to kind of recap again, the hard cost for this, almost $700,000. The opportunity cost for this, almost $4 million. For just this 40-person sales team with a $1 million quota and 115K OTE. Nothing there is too out of the ordinary, right? Like, averages would show that's a fairly, maybe the 1 million is a little high for a 40K sales team now that I'm thinking about it, but still, like, here at Spiff, that's not too far off for what we have our quotas. We have about a 35 to 40-person sales team. So Now, like, this is great, right? Let's highlight the problem. Let's tell everyone what's wrong with this and that you're losing a ton of money. What I want to spend most of the time here talking is there's proven ways to cut this number in half. And it's not going to be one size fits all. It's always easier said than done. But I want to walk us through 5 different things that we can do and we can check on and be checking on to kind of see like how we can actually like cut this attrition number in half to save you some serious revenue or add additional revenue to your company's bottom line.
Tanner, in addition to these 5 questions, we got our first question from our audience. Thank you, Charlie. As we're going through this, Tanner, would love to get your thoughts on what the biggest drivers are between choosing an annual comp plan or annual quota targets versus a quarterly target. And is there a world where a hybrid model exists? So thank you, Charlie, for those questions. Didn't know if you wanted to address those now or add them to this evaluation that you're going to walk us through.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's a great spot for just us to kick this off. Let's, Charlie, as far as like on this, I think you'll actually see us kind of tie this into some of our conversation as we go. So I'm not going to click this one as answered yet because I want to try to answer it throughout these next couple slides over the next little bit. Long story short is, and like I know this is everyone's favorite answer, was like it kind of depends on on what you're doing and what you're selling, but there is a hybrid model that works really well. And I think that you'll see it through some of these things I'll actually apply to that, where it's like just to make quotas work in general, how you make them more effective, and then happy to kind of from there talk around some different like suggestions on and benefits to both models of quarterly, annually, or hybrid from there. Awesome. So I mean, Will, I think would love to kick off on our poll here. Do we have that one all teed up for us, Elizabeth? I think she got it there for us.
Yes.
Yeah, it is launched. So how would you rate your organization on these aspects on a scale of 1 to 5, being we do this very well or we are failing at this? How do you think you're doing in terms of comp plans and aligning it to performance, but also culture? Tanner, you brought that up. I think part of comp plans do influence culture. So really interested in understanding the group's responses.
Guys, I'm so sorry about that. I realized I didn't mute my notification, so I got Elizabeth over there. I'm so sorry. Sharing my screen again here. There we go.
All right, so poll is almost going to end. Let's check out the results. So I'd love to see this. So 47% are saying we are doing a decent job, which is great to hear. 27% are okay, and 20% are sort of failing at it, and that's okay. Hopefully, Tanner, we can help this group out, put more people into the 5 category here.
Let's do it. I'm stoked about it. Like I said, I think there's going to be some great things we could dive into here. Low-hanging fruit and things that are going to be quick and easy to adjust and implement more or less here to help you make some more revenue in your company. So let's dive right in. So like as we're kind of looking here again, the 5 things we're going to talk about, proven methods to make sure that we can make your comp plan more attractive to your employees and cut down that attrition is 1, are you updating numbers for your reps regularly? Right. 2, are you using team-based incentive plans? And that's a super interesting one, but I'm excited to dive into. 3, are you using accelerators? There's some really cool numbers around accelerators and how they help. Are you currently capping commissions? And then lastly, do your reps understand their comp plan, right? And some of these are probably going to seem pretty common sense, but I'm excited to dive into some of these numbers with you to kind of show you what we could be doing. So do you update your numbers for your reps regularly, right? This is a really interesting one. So what we're talking about here, what we're looking at is reps oftentimes, and just from like my personal like qualitative experience, just interviewing customers and talking a lot about compensation, I would say that more times than not, if I ask a rep how much they're making in commissions or what their comp plan is to date, they generally have just like kind of a finger in the wind type of thing, or a spreadsheet that they're using on their own to set this up. This isn't a sales pitch for any type of software. What we're trying to show here is that people oftentimes don't know what they're making, and that can be extremely disconcerting for your teams, right? So 85% of millennials, which is what makes up a lot of our sales teams now, say they'd be more confident with more consistent views into performance, and 83% of employees found timely recognition to be more fulfilling than financial rewards or gifts. So like that last one was really interesting for me, Will. I'd actually love your thoughts. Like essentially what the study said when I read this was like the timely recognition of the close was almost more fulfilling than the commission that was paid for the close. And like it made me really think about that, like the effect of like small things like this that can have on your sales org and that culture there. I'm curious if you have any experiences or thoughts around that.
Absolutely. And arguably not so small impact that I think this is really representing. It reminds me instantly of the Power of the Habit. Really great book, but it really walks us through the habit loop and how we can create a routine, a reward, and a trigger that is triggering that action. And what you just described to me sounds very familiar to the habit loop, and it extends past compensation, but is so applicable here. Measure what matters and make that feedback loop to the behaviors that drive those actions as quick as possible. And you will see from this study here that there's going to be improvement.
Yeah, I have an interesting experience with this one. Before I was at Spiff, I was, again, during college, actually, I was a sales manager at a call center while I was putting myself through school. And the comp plan there was fine, but there was two issues with it. One, the numbers that came out to like hit your bonus goals usually didn't come out until the second or third week of the month, right? And then also the actual update on that was about a 24 to 48 hour delay. And it was like, again, you didn't actually know what you were earning until like the last week of the month because the numbers would be put together. So between all those delays, the comp plan oftentimes was like kind of a finger in the wind, like you had an idea, but not really. So I had an amazing manager and mentor there who allowed me to kind of get my hands in the comp plan. My unhealthy like enjoyment of compensation started here, I guess. And we built a new comp plan one, but the main thing that we did like with this change is we sent hourly updates just through a spreadsheet, through a macro that we built from a system. Like I got some help that we emailed to my team. And we saw a 15% increase in performance just that first month. And like, we didn't change anything. Like we weren't coaching on things that were much different. We were doing small things here and there, just all around the board when it came to compensation. But just that visibility into their numbers regularly allowed them to be more confident on where they were at, where they were standing. And I think like there's a lot there too, where it's like people feel like they care. And then you can see their performance in time. Like it was incredible for me to see that jump for me personally. So I mean, just to recap, this is potentially a really easy low-hanging fruit for you to cut this attrition down to make more revenue for your organization. So following this, really interesting as well, and like something that this was the last point that I added to this. I had a few others that I was playing with as far as like what I was going to be suggesting here, but this one just came in and like really held strong to me is, are we using team-based incentive plans? So 83% of companies report the teams-based plans are effective, like, cool, great. 83% say it's effective, but 85% of Fortune 1000 companies are using some form of team-based pay. And not that I'm saying we need to like look at the Fortune 1000 companies as like our North Star on how to compensate people, but I did think that was a really interesting fact as far as just a data point on like what some really successful companies are doing to incentivize their people. So a lot of this is pulled out of a study done by Northwestern. And it talked, and I'll send this to you guys. We don't need to bore you with reading through this, but essentially, like allowing for teams include a better collaboration and teamwork, which inherently is going to increase like people's stickiness to their organizations and their overall job satisfaction. But it also just created like a shared vision, a shared goal. And you saw an increase, not only an increase in performance, but a decrease in attrition across your sales teams. So team-based compensation plans can take a lot of different forms, and they don't need to be super aggressive, right? Like when we're saying this, in no way would we make a suggestion where it's like, cool, scrap your comp plan, pay everyone according to everyone else's performance. In some certain roles, that's effective. Like there are roles, like for my sales engineer team here at Spiff, they're majorly based on how the whole sales team is performing. There's a few things they can do to earn accelerators, but their comp plan is mostly based on team performance. Our AEs though, here, their team-based performance is much smaller. Oftentimes it's viewed almost more as a bonus, and it has to do with a lot more just like trying to get people to win as a team and play as a team. Well, I mean, as far as like your experience, has there been a team-based plan that's worked well for you in the past?
Absolutely. I've managed both sides of the revenue equation, including the retention side, and have heavily relied on team-based incentives to really create a culture of sharing and collaboration, and have found that to be really, really successful on the retention side. On the new business side, especially with the BDRs, we have team-based incentives. I think it's not only really exciting to create them, but it's exciting to see what it does for your organization. The collaboration that it creates, the camaraderie, it has so many great benefits that it doesn't have to be the entire incentive plan. But a portion of it definitely creates that same benefit that I think a lot of companies, based on this study, see as well.
Yeah, I think it's just such a powerful tool that like can be viewed as a negative a lot of the time, because I think some people are nervous that they don't want other people affecting each other's comp plans. But I actually think we should probably start changing that norm to the opposite, where it's actually a lever you can pull to increase performance overall, right? Not every single person is always going to be happy with what you do. Like that's just one of the rules in compensation. Is like every time you change it, a chunk of people will be upset that you changed it. But like if you're thinking about the greater vision here, you do the right things to do to make sure you enable your teams to succeed. Team-based incentive plans are just a really powerful like lever to pull when it comes to decreasing that attrition and increasing the type of revenue that you can pull into your company. So another one, I think like a lot of us probably go without saying, but that you'd be surprised how often we see people who don't use these, but like accelerators are shown to lead to at least a 17% increase in annual sales. So this was actually pulled from a Harvard article. And then for anyone who wants any of these sources, I have them all listed here in the notes. Everything's notated, so I'm happy to share any of these studies with you. But down here, it was really interesting. It says accelerators or overachievement commission ramps up to pay of top performers, creating a progressive structure. And it is interesting as they continue to talk through this, because essentially what it said is like when the more accelerators you have, the more you retain your top performers, kind of regardless of some other things. Like obviously things kind of need to be working together. They need to be there and exist, but your accelerators alone can create like a culture of winning and a culture of overachievement because they're incentivized to overachieve. Oftentimes accelerators can be scary because you potentially leave a lot of like what some people would lead to liability, like we call liability at the top end of that, where some people could really take advantage of that. But just make sure when you're building these things, if you're taking a look, that you're looking at what that number is. In reality, compensation is meant and built to be motivating. It's the original driver of performance, right? From the beginning of time, people worked to get paid. So it's the same. It's something that we're conditioned to do, and just in general, across all boards, across all the bases, whether it's variable pay or salary. And when you do things like accelerators, just make sure that you're both winning, right? Like if like the way that I've really appreciated how we pay people here at Spiff is like we pay a pretty rich commission plan for our AEs, but you better believe that like if our AEs are making a ton of money, so is Spiff, and it's a very like mutually like successful thing. It's a when I hear stories about managers or organizations kind of cutting down or capping accelerators, it always makes me feel like there's kind of a misconception of what's going on, because you're potentially like hurting both of you, right? You're potentially keeping your sales rep from being as the happiest they could be by overachieving, but also you're potentially leaving revenue on the table for you as a company. So anything you'd like to add to that, Will?
It's such a great concept here. I think it really reminds me of just really how powerful it is to set goals that lead to higher performance, and creating accelerator levels in your comp plan really taps into that. And instantly, for anyone that's into fitness, health, you set those goals, it really becomes a motivator to hit them. Same concept is being tapped into here with the creation of accelerators in your comp plan.
I love it. And I think, so I'm pulling up this QA question again, Charlie, just so I make sure that I can answer this correct, because I think this is a great time to kind of weave in this question around like quotas and targets. Something that's really interesting, and like one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of hold on to answer this, is quarterly targets and annual. Like if you want to do some type of hybrid approach, I think accelerators are a great reason to do one way or the other. Oftentimes, something I've seen that works really well is having your annual number broken into quarters. And those quarters oftentimes have different numbers that add up to that, right? Like Q4 is generally not equal to Q3. But a lot of times you'll see accelerators actually reset quarterly against an annual quota. So it's when I say a lot of times, like I guess maybe that's presumptuous. I don't have the actual data to back me up there, but a lot of companies that we're seeing move to a model like this find that it's really refreshing for their sales reps. Sometimes people have bad quarters. Sometimes your top employee, like top reps, have bad quarters. And it can oftentimes be very de-incentivizing for the rest of the year if what they're actually concerned about now is just like hitting their number. They need to be concerned about that anyways. But the fact that you can kind of have a fresh slate to kind of earn more money is a really powerful tool that you can lean on, that oftentimes, and more often than not, is going to be mutually beneficial to you. So it's also, goals get stagnant, right? So the longer a goal sits, the more stagnant it becomes. When we set quotas at the beginning of the year, it's a number that's there. It's a number that gets put on a sticky note on someone's computer. But it's the longer it goes, the more it becomes kind of a number that's just there to almost scare them more than anything else, right? So finding ways to make it refresh, finding ways to make it beneficial, and finding ways to make it motivating are really important. And accelerators are great ways to do that. Even if you stick to just an annual quota target, finding some way to use resetting accelerators throughout the year is really powerful. But just accelerators in general, often like it's pretty traditional, and it works well, and that's why that you see a lot of people hit accelerators in Q4, right? Because they're building their pipe the whole year. Q4 becomes really rich, and they're able to have an awesome end of the year. So a few different ways to do it, and happy to have a longer conversation on that. Some of this has a lot to do with like your sales cycles and different things that you're dealing with, cut size, management. There's so many different things to kind of like suggest one way or the other, but hopefully that was potentially helpful there for you, Charlie.
Yeah, the first thing that I thought of, Tanner, was how impactful a sales cycle is in consideration for an annual, quarterly, or hybrid approach. That factor is definitely something to consider when creating a comp plan. Yeah,
I just want to agree 100%. It's like we get asked all the time, like, hey, what's the best way to comp people? It's like, that's a great question. When you figure it out, let me know. Because it's like not that simple, right? There's just so many things that go into it. And like for a comp plan that's really successful for one company could be extremely unsuccessful at another company. It just has a lot to do with so many different variables. So awesome. Let's move on. I think accelerators, I guess, hopefully kind of goes hopefully this was able to help kind of paint a picture. I'm guessing a lot of the people on this call are using some form of accelerator. They're becoming much more and more mainstream. But if you're not, something to definitely suggest it for you to take a look at here. Another one that, like, again, you would think is kind of moving away, is becoming less and less mainstream, but you'd still be surprised, is capping commissions. 79% of managers without commission caps reported to hit or exceed their goal. And then removing caps from commissions can improve revenue up to 9%. Again, most of these are coming from Harvard articles, Inc.com, like at least somewhat credible sources here, right? And citing different studies. This is a huge opportunity for some people, especially if you're on kind of maybe a little bit more of an outdated or traditional plan, where you do see caps. Different industries cap commissions more often, and kind of similar to accelerators, oftentimes commission caps are put there out of concern around liability, right? And what I would say to that in general is, it's time to potentially rework your model there, because the liability should be the opposite of your concern. You should actually be making sure that you're opening up to earn as much revenue as possible. I'm sure, and I know there are places where sometimes you do have to cap certain things just to make sure that your company stays alive, that you can do those things. But for the vast majority of times, capping commissions is something that is going away, and the data supports that as well. So another really good low-hanging fruit as far as something that you can do to adjust your commission plan or your comp plan right now to make more revenue for your organization.
And Tanner, one thing that really sticks out to me is I think I mentioned earlier just how comp plans can be how culture is created within your organization. This cap says so much about that culture. And I think it's really an opportunity to really present to your teams the we win together sentiment. And I am all for uncapped quota because it should be aligned with the business goals. And it's our goal to design a comp plan that doesn't break, but allows for the we all win approach.
Yeah, I'm so on board with that. It's funny, every time I think about capping commissions, I think of the Office episode when Jim Halpert hits his commission cap, so he spends the rest of the day just like bugging people or like messing with people, and like that's kind of obviously a little bit of an exaggeration, but at the same time it's really not. It's a little different now in a remote world as well. Like if you're telling people that they can't make any more money, what's their incentive to log in tomorrow, right? And so like I think one thing that happens is if you cap commissions, what you're actually doing is keeping your best people from putting the time in towards the end of the month or end of the quarter, because what's in it for them at this point, right? Like we would love to say like, hey, everyone's just like bought into the spirit of the company and the vision, and like that's probably true to an extent for a lot of these people on the call, especially with smaller sales teams. But also like people come to work to make money at the end of the day. Like we can boil it down and there's a lot more to it than that. But like if you're telling them that they can't make anything else and on a variable compensation plan, there's not a lot there to motivate them to work any harder or even to work at all until it's a reset, right? Or another thing you'll also see that I've left out here is this also is going to incentivize sandbagging, which is every RevOps person and sales manager's person's worst nightmare. And you can't blame your sales reps if you're capping commissions, because what they'll do is they'll just wait. They'll just push it off. So another thing to call out there. And I saved the best for last. This one to me was incredible. So this is from World at Work. So really one of the more like, if not the most, sorry, I can't think today, I guess, really the most well-known compensation like survey and data company out there. Great source for data if anyone's interested. But only 22% of companies will tell you that most of their employees actually understand their comp plan. Now, this is a little dated. It's probably a little bit better than it was in 2016. I'm actively looking to get the numbers for 2021. So hopefully I can even update that in like an upcoming article or something. But if you look at these numbers, like almost 50% of companies said most do not understand their comp plan. That's crazy to me. Like, and it's crazy to me that's probably okay for a lot of organizations. And like, I don't know. I think like I hate running. And if someone makes me run a race, but they don't actually tell me where the finish line is, like I'm not going to be that motivated to run very fast because I don't know where I'm running to, right? And I think like we have to understand that like we need to be very like introspective, like do our, like if I was to go ask any rep in the bullpen today what their comp plan is, could they explain it to me in 1 to 2 sentences? If the answer to that is no, then it's probably too complicated, or they actually just don't know what it is. Do you have it modeled out somewhere? Is it in a software, whether it's in your CRM or whatever you're using to like where reps are spending their time in? Like, do they have any indication of what it is? Are they being trained on their comp plans? Are managers talking about it in one-on-ones? I mean, Will, has this been pretty consistent for you as well with what you see?
It resonates so well. I think humans are just curious by nature. They want to know how things work. And it's to, I think, everyone's advantage when designing a comp plan to keep that in mind. The simpler it is and the clearer it is, the more likely the reps will be successful at hitting it, because they will clearly understand the activities, the actions, the behaviors that they're being asked to do in order to hit the goals that we are setting for them. I feel like, I would love to do the survey today, Tanner, because I hope it's, 50 to 60 to even like 90% of people these days understand their comp plan, because I think it's such an important lever that we can pull to improve performance.
Yeah, it's something that again, I don't think there's any bad intentions here, right? Like, I don't think anyone's like, hey, let's make a comp plan that's really hard to understand. I think a lot of us can get caught up in like the art of compensation and try to make this like perfectly executed comp plan that works exactly for what you're doing. And it can oftentimes be like really, really complicated. It's really important. Like, again, this is something I go back to a lot, like your comp plan and your comp philosophy across your entire organization, not just your sales organization, is built to motivate them to work and to reach goals and to do what they need to do. There's so much more than that. There's so many intrinsic things. There's so many like different people. Like, you don't come to work just to make money, but ultimately like that's one of the main reasons they do. And if you're making it difficult to understand, like what's keeping them there, right? If they don't know what they're understanding, like I'll tell you that most people who don't understand their comp plan generally think they're getting cheated out of money, right? They generally think that you are trying to lie to them. They generally will like over scrutinize their numbers, and they will spend a lot of their time going in and trying to calculate that. And then they'll take a lot of your time to figure out like why it's wrong or right. Where a lot of the times what it is just a loss, like a misunderstanding or a mistrust or just a lack of communication around what that comp plan is, even if it is really complicated and it needs to be that way. If there's really no way to simplify it, train on it, make sure your team has some enablement around that. Again, things that are well worth the time and investment and that will save you time in the future. And out of any of these things we've gone over, this is probably the most important and also simplest thing that you can do to affect the churn, your attrition numbers inside your organization, helping them understand the comp plan. Again, simple thing, but the data will show that like most of us are not doing as good as we think at that.
You brought up a really good point, Tanner, around that. It's not intentional, and I've been in those conversations how we're talking about these hypothetical situations to build this perfect comp plan. And commonly we spend a majority of our time talking about these nuanced situations. And I think the 80-20 rule really comes into play here, where if we really just focus on what's most important, the essence is still captured, and we can save ourselves time in designing the program or the comp plan, as well as the reps time with understanding it, by really focusing and making sure that the comp plan works for a majority of the scenarios. Hopefully that's something that we all can bring back into our 2022 planning that's going on right now.
Totally like I agree 100% with that, Will. Thank you for sharing. And like with that, let's kind of move on to the last section here. So appreciate everyone. Hopefully this has been an interactive and helpful session for you today. I know I've learned a ton setting this up, and hopefully it's been, you've been able to take a few things from it, but I want to actually finish with like, let's switch some things up, right? So at the beginning of this, we worked through a quick formula. We walked through this process of like, how much money are you potentially losing a year? And not just in cost, but in opportunities because of your compensation plan. So let's just assume that like we cut this in half, right? So let's cut our attrition number down to like 25% total, where we only lose 5 reps instead of 9 reps to leave. Now, like one thing that's important to understand, you can't always make everyone happy. Like going in here and telling you that you can like lose all of your comp related churn is just never going to happen. But you can cut it down. You can make it much smaller. And let's look what happens when you just make a kind of a small adjustment. So again, same formula. We're just going to switch the numbers out. So instead of almost $700,000, you're doing almost $400,000 in hard costs. You save about, close to $300,000. 374K is the hard cost for those 5 reps that you've lost, right? So again, really like a good savings there. I know for a company like even with Spiff, if I can save $300,000 somewhere, that's 2 more people that I can hire, or that's a lot more like licenses that we can throw into our whatever tool or something we can invest in, right? So a huge opportunity there for you. And then last and certainly not least, when you adjust this number, you're going to lose the same amount per rep, but you're only going to lose 2 million instead of 3.6 million. So you are kind of gaining an additional $1.6 million in revenue that year, theoretically, by only losing those 5 reps instead of those 9. And I think that that's a realistic goal. I mean, Will, I don't, maybe gut check me there, but like when you actually break it down, like fixing a 35% attrition problem seems like a lot. It's like, hey, how do I really get that number down? That's pretty average. When it comes to like, hey, I just need to save 4 more people this year, or I just need to save like, I don't know, 10% less people from leaving the company for comp-related issues, like that's potentially a few $1 million that you could attract for in your goals, or you could account for in your goals this next year. But maybe I'm off there. Yeah, I'd love your thoughts on that, Will. I just like the realism of that.
I think it's conservative, and I think that it's conservative because when you think about how we're kind of walking through this challenge, we're only focusing on those that actually do leave, and not thinking about the auxiliary benefits of those that do stay, because most conceivably, it's your best reps that are leaving. They're frustrated, and so those are the ones that we want to save. And this is a very conservative, logical assumptions that you're making. But I think the losses that you are saving is much greater than this.
Okay, cool. I'm glad I'm not too far off there. Then I appreciate the backup on that. Yeah, it was when I was working through this, it was crazy for me to run these numbers. It really was. As I was doing my research here, and like when you break it down, like you are saving, $300,000 in hard costs at one point. It's actually 1.6 in opportunity costs, or 1.2, sorry, in opportunity costs. So like that's a lot of money. And especially again, we're talking about a 40-person sales team, which means you're probably talking about a company about 100 to 120 people. And that's a significant amount of money for any organization, but especially one at that size. So, ultimately, there's some huge opportunities here for us. And as far as like, that's kind of where I'll leave it with everyone today, as far as like how you can save, why you're losing revenue because of your comp plan. Hopefully there were a few things in here that you can take off. I'm excited to do some Q&A here at the end if there's any additional questions, but there's those small things that we can do there to really adjust our comp plans to optimize, to make more money, to stop losing revenue.
I couldn't agree more, Tanner. And again, doubling down on the Q&A that's coming up right now. We got one question here from Cole, Tanner, that I'll read off. You mentioned earlier that comp plans that work well for one company don't necessarily work for another company. Could you help expand on what those factors are when you're considering how to design the comp plan for your business?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think like I may have overstated that a little bit, Cole, just kind of playing the extremes. I would say in general, that's correct. There's like if one comp plan, if I have a comp plan here at Spiff and I go take it to, I don't know, to wherever you're at there, like chances are it's probably not going to work because it's tailored towards like how we sell Spiff. But there are going to be a few things that you can do that are pretty consistent. One is like goals, right? Like you should make sure you have goals, accelerators. And then I'm a big fan of having like a couple different types of commission, like we call it rules here at Spiff, where people can earn for different things. Like for example, we pay different rates on implementation versus recurring, right? So there's some of those things that I think can travel across. Where I would start on when you're trying to build a plan, if I was sitting down with you, walking me through maybe what I would do, the first question I would ask you is how big is your team? That's going to be a huge factor in what you can manage. The bigger the team is, the less complexity you can afford. And not like you can't afford a lot of complexity anyways, but if you have a sales team of 400 people, you can't have a million edge cases unless you want to hire an entire team of commission analysts to run your comp plan for you. I'd also ask you what your deal cycle is and how transactional or enterprise you are as far as your sales cycles. So depending on who you're selling to, if it takes 12 months to close a deal, the way that you're going to be ramping your employees or the way that you're going to build your accelerators are going to be like incredibly important and different from a company who sells a B2C app, where it's mostly driven through an app store or something different. Like those transactional like things, putting an annual quota on a very transactional company can be a little tougher or like not super beneficial because like that number's, they're going to close 300 or 400 deals to hit that number. You got to break that up, right? So those are just some of the first things that I would do. Culture is another big one. And that's the reason why it's a little different is like different managers and cultures are better at incentivizing people differently. So for better or for worse, if you have a company, the culture that's like very serious about their numbers and very much on top of you for that, you can get a lot more aggressive with those goals and a lot higher. You can generally push people a little bit harder, and some of those more high touch comp plans will work because people are very much aware of where they stand. Whereas if you have companies that's a lot more, or a culture that's a lot more like trusting in ways, they're not that there's, I'm like contradicting myself in a way that I actually don't, I'm not doing a great job of like explaining this, but there's other comp plans where it's like if you're not in a micromanaging type organization, or you don't have like a ton of oversight or a ton of managers watching over people. This often happens when you're like a younger company, right? When you have like maybe one manager for 9 sales reps, and those sales reps are all still trying to figure out like product market fit and everything. You're probably going to want something that's a little bit more space, a little bit more flow, and that allows you to make changes a little bit more often. There's a lot of different extremes there. I don't know if that was helpful, Cole, and happy to talk more through specifics, but again, the things I would look at, just to boil it down: how transactional are you? How big is your organization? What's your company's culture like? And those are like 3 really good places to start. And then from there, we'd probably end up putting a similar backbone to most comp plans in, but there's always going to be different ways. There's different products, different things you're doing.
Tanner, we brought up so many great tips and a lot of great questions that we answered, and you know, one of the things that came to me was that with your comment about culture, you know, we just introduced a whole bunch of new concepts to our audience here, and I'm curious if you had any thoughts about how to manage kind of the change management aspect. Like, how do you get, you know, these awesome tips into action within the organization? And I also recognize we could probably spend another hour or 2 talking about that, but you know, a helpful tip for our audience would be something that I think would be really useful from hearing from you, Tanner, about that.
Yeah, my buzzword answer on this one, it will always be educate and empathize, right, with your people. So if you're making any change to comp plans, you know, most of these comp plans, like these changes that we're suggesting you make, generally are like pretty beneficial. Like they're going to make you a hero to your sales organization. I actually would say what you're going to need to fight as far as the culture battle will be more upstream, more cross-functional, which is like in your finance team or potentially your executive team, because you're going to be introducing potentially what looks like extra cost just on the balance sheet, right? So, but even like all that said and done, like it has everything to do with how you're educating and empathizing with your people, whether that's you're empathizing with your the people who are helping you from the finance team, whether it's from someone on your business development team who's dialing, or one of your enterprise reps, like making sure that you sit down, include them in the conversations, don't blindside people with changes, and make sure that you document what you're doing and that it's consistent. So, and then also put yourself in their shoes. One of the biggest mistakes that people make with making changes to comp plans is doing it in a room, and like kind of just like making it happen and not thinking what it's like to be that person who you're now affecting their livelihood, right? Whether it's for better or for worse. Like when you're making a change to a comp plan, you're changing the aspect of how someone earns the money that they pay for their rent for, right? Or how they buy groceries. And like, I know it's not always that way. Like most talented salespeople are not necessarily counting their commission check to make sure they have enough grocery money. But like it's a way that you need to think about that, because that's how they're going to feel about it. So those would be maybe my quick thing. And Will, I'd love to get your thoughts on that too.
I mean, I couldn't agree more with your simple buzzword, educate and involve the team, because I still shiver a bit, reminding myself of coming in January 2nd after a great year, and coming into our first meeting of the year with the sales team, and boom, comp plan changes, and we're all like, what? I don't understand. Involving down to the individual contributors through the process, really strategic individual contributors, goes a long way. And I couldn't agree more that it's not just involving the sales team, but it's involving the finance team. It's involving senior leadership through that process is going to make all of these changes, or any changes, that much easier to get adopted.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Awesome. Well, Tanner, we are 2 minutes till the end. I still will stick on for any more questions that we have, but I see Elizabeth, who's going to close us out. So thank you, Tanner. Thank you, guest, and thank you, Elizabeth.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, Tanner and Will. It has been fantastic to have your insight on this subject. The recording and key takeaways will be made available shortly, so be on the lookout for our daily recaps of the summit with these links and more. And be sure to check out the rest of our summit offerings. I'm putting that in the chat now. So if y'all want to see what's headed your way for tomorrow. Thank you again to Spiff and all of our summit sponsors. And thank you to everyone out there for attending. We can't wait to see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for our panel, Out with the Old, In with the New, RevOps Redux. Stay safe and have a lovely rest of your day. See y'all tomorrow morning.